We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Because apparently there are Kentucky Fried Chicken in multiple Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in places, but they're all owned by the same franchisor, and so they're all like at the franchisatron, and so they're all at the same level of quality.
Okay.
Versus like here, where they're sort of all over the place.
I guess it depends on where you get your chicken, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, what's your quality control?
Crispy Crunchy's the same.
Crispy Crunchy's amazing.
Of course, Crispy Crunchy's the shit. It's the best at North Philly. Well, I don't know if it's still around anymore, but on... Where is that? No, Northern Liberties.
Spring Garden.
Yes.
It's like Front and Spring Garden.
Front and Spring Garden. Is it a Sunoco or an A+? Sunoco. A+.
A+ is A+ separate from Sunoco?
Maybe they're the same.
I think A+ is the like Sunoco, like not restaurant, but like quick stop store.
Okay. Well, the best Crispy Crunchy is, I think it's there, but it might just be because that was my first Crispy Crunchy.
Yeah, I don't think I've had bad Crispy Crunchy.
No, it doesn't exist.
Really?
It doesn't exist.
So we're rolling.
Are we rolling?
We are rolling.
Hi. This is so welcome to our podcast. We've actually decided to drop crypto and just talk about fried chicken franchises all around the world. And today we're going to study the amazingly successful fried chicken franchise in Antwerp, run by Gustav Gluppenspiel, who loves... he just loves chicken. He loves to sell it. He slings the chicken all day long. That's what we're going to talk about.
This is only our second episode.
What?
It's our second. We've lost half of our audience already.
Yeah, they're gone. They're done. Sorry.
And yet we've gained like 100 new listeners who are just like, ooh, chicken.
Ooh, chicken. Yes, I want this.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I would probably listen to that podcast.
We need to stop talking about this because now I want it.
All right. So this is episode 2, part 2 of our Surgeon's Photograph series. I am Matt. I'm here with EJ. Yo. And let's see. So last time we talked a little bit about the history of Loch Ness. We talked about the formation of Loch Ness, the size of it, and the Scottish folklore that had come before the Loch Ness Monsters, talking specifically about like the Kelpie, the water horse, some of the other monsters, as well as the Stronsay beast that was found off the coast of a Scottish island. Today, we're going to start to get into the actual photographic evidence of the Loch Ness Monster, specifically this surgeon's photograph. But first, we're going to talk about the photograph that came before the surgeon's photograph, which is the very first photo ever taken of the alleged Loch Ness Monster. Talking about the photograph in question. Now, this photograph was taken in November of 1933. Just west of the River Foyers, where George Spicer, we remember George Spicer, he's the one who was driving his car and saw an animal cross the road in front of him with a lamb in its mouth. Right. Mm-hmm. Just in the same area where he had his sighting, a man named Hugh Gray captured...
I thought you were going to say Hugh Grant, and I was going to get so excited.
A man named Hugh Grant.
He befuddledly captured...
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
I fumbled with my camera.
Hugh Grant. Didn't he also... No, Hugh Grant was not James Bond. I'm thinking of Pierce Brosnan.
Hugh Grant was not James Bond.
I confused them, though.
I don't think Hugh Grant could play James Bond.
I
oh
think
my
he
God.
Could probably.
That is a radically different James Bond.
I'm not saying... I know that, but I'm just saying I confuse them sometimes. Okay. So, yes, Hugh Grant found... He took a photograph. Okay, continue learning.
November 1933, Hugh Gray, not Hugh Grant, captured a photograph of, honestly, not much of anything at all. You can see water around it. You can see a dark line running horizontally across the center of the frame, maybe with a tail on the left and a head on the right. But the photograph is so smudgy that it's hard to tell what anything is. This is the result of poor quality of film, the motion blur from a slow shutter, and light leaking into the negative before or during the processing. The original negative seems to be lost, so it's hard to tell exactly what's going on in this picture. We can discuss different theories for probably half an hour, but it's probably best just to leave this as one big question mark, yet another in the growing reports of something strange in the loch.
It seems like it's just like a shitty photograph. So photographs, I feel like, impromptu photographs of that time were probably total shit. And the only good ones are the ones that are staged. That's my thinking on that.
That's an interesting concept. It's not something that I ever really thought about. I think the thing is, we'll talk a little bit later on about the rise of casual photography. Because for a long time, cameras were not something that was like accessible to the general population. You know, they were prohibitively expensive. They were big. You needed... talking about the old 4x5 cameras, the sort that you would hide under the sheet and take the picture, and everybody had to stand in place for a long time and all of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's... What is that? Is that like the Civil War battlefield photographs that you see where everybody's quite still for tragic reasons?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they're quite still because they're dead.
That's what
in
I'm
the battlefield
saying.
photography.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, they did not move.
But no, I mean, for a while there were cameras where you had to just remain still because the shutters were so slow, and you had to wait for the film for the image to develop on the negative and all of that. So yes, the older cameras were just not accessible to many people, and slowly as 35 millimeter film started to come into vogue and be accessible thanks to Leica, then all of a sudden more people had cameras. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those people knew how to use their cameras. Mm-hmm. They were new objects. They were complex. It wasn't just a point and shoot. You had to set your focus. You had to set your aperture. You had to have the right film stock and all of these things. And it just... it was very hard to take an impromptu photograph unless you really knew what you were doing or you got lucky.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Makes sense.
So about a month after Gray's photograph was published in the Scottish Daily Record, the London-based newspaper The Daily Mail decided that they wanted in on the action. Now, I don't want to speak too ill of the Daily Mail, particularly because they have lawyers. But the Daily Mail has long held some controversial viewpoints and tends to use the word journalism similar to the way that Philadelphians use the word John. That is to say, however the fuck you want.
Right. Just for anything.
Just anything. It can mean anything. Starting in 1922, the Daily Mail was wholly owned and operated by the aptly named Harold Harmsworth, or Lord Rothermere. Now, I don't know about you, but there's something about the post-Harry Potter generation where anyone who calls themselves Lord something just kind of seems evil to me.
Yeah. I think it's just British royalty.
I mean, it is, but there's just, I have trouble distancing the word Lord from... and I know that there's House of Lords and all of those things, but still Lord just makes me think of Voldemort.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And funny thing, Lord Rothermere, he did his part to cement himself as a particularly villainous individual. So Lord Rothermere, again, member of the House of Lords, right? And the man in control of the Daily Mail spent the 1930s having repeated meetings with Adolf Hitler, including attending a dinner party in December of 1934 as Hitler's guest of honor.
Ooh, fascists. Fascism.
He donated to the Nazi Party and was very outspoken about how the Nazis were the only thing standing in the way of communism's evil attempted world domination.
Oh, dear God. Everybody's so... It's crazy.
Communism.
So this was the 30s?
This is 1933, 34, yeah.
So he probably knew Mosley. Oh, okay, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
He also used his platform to champion the National Union of Fascists and their leader, Oswald Mosley.
Mosley! I'm not cheering for him. It's because...
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders, a phenomenal show. So Lord Rothermere said Mosley had, this is a direct quote from an op-ed piece that Rothermere published. He said that Mosley had sound, common-sense conservative doctrine. As a purely British organization, the Black Shirts, that's the fascists, will respect those principles of tolerance which are traditional in British politics. They have no prejudice either of class or race.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes statements don't age well.
That's like the opposite definition of fascism. Like, all you care about is race and class. Oh my god.
In short, at the time, the Daily Mail was run by a fascist Nazi sympathizer. Ugh. I would love to say that things have gotten better in the intervening 90 years, but in that time, the Daily Mail has also made fun of women's rights and coined the term suffragette, said that there's a gene that makes you gay, claimed that smoking a single cannabis joint damages your memory and causes schizophrenia, published a cartoon blaming domestic terror attacks on Syrian refugees, and claimed numerous times that climate change isn't real or the evidence for it isn't overwhelming. Today, Wikipedia doesn't even allow you to cite the Daily Mail as a source because they're so unreliable.
They just sort of sound like every right-wing news media outlet.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
I kind of thought that they were just like some fun little tabloid. First of all, I know nothing about the Daily Mail, really.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm.
But I always thought there were some tabloid that did Bat Boy and crap like that.
Right.
But I did not think that even today they were perpetuating right-wing propaganda like that in the same way that our right-wing news media outlets are doing the same thing.
I think, and this might be incorrect, and listeners can let us know if I'm off base here, but I think that the American idea of tabloids has more to do with celebrities and, the Weekly World News, stuff, yeah. National Enquirer kind of thing. That's your Bat Boy. I'm pretty sure Bat Boy came from the National Enquirer.
I think so too.
So that's like my husband married an alien, and now we have a half humanoid son or something like that, right? Whereas in Britain, tabloids actually mean this kind of newspaper.
Oh, damn. Okay. I did not know that.
As far as I know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. You're probably asking, what the fuck does a fascist Nazi sympathizer's newspaper have to do with the Loch Ness Monster?
I am asking that. I'm wondering, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings us to the main character in our narrative, a man named Marmaduke Arundel Wetherell.
Oh yeah, that's a 5-star name. That's a 5-star name. Excellent.
He's a self-proclaimed big game hunter and film actor and director.
Ooh. Wait, okay, I don't like the big game hunter thing, but I like the second part.
Well, you might like Duke.
Okay.
Duke, as he calls himself. He spent a good deal of time in Africa. This was a time in British history where world exploration was at an all-time high, right? So, thanks to the growing popularity of newspapers, regular people were reading stories of Shackleton's exploration to the Antarctic or Mallory's ascent of Mount Everest. The British Museum funded an expedition to Honduras and Syria. This was also the time of Roy Chapman Andrews. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Nope.
Oh, okay. You know Roy Chapman Andrews because he's a swashbuckling explorer who inspired the character Indiana Jones.
Oh.
So all in all, this was a time where the world wanted to learn about itself and was learning about it and really, really wanted to experience it through the eyes and exploits of daring men, right? And Duke Wetherell wanted to be one of these guys, going so far as to direct a movie based on the life of David Livingstone and casting himself in the titular role. You know anything about David Livingstone?
No.
Okay. Livingstone, it's a story much too broad to get into here, but he explored all over Africa, had a great many adventures, and became sort of a figurehead of colonial exploration. Okay. I hear that grunt.
I'm sorry.
But so it's worth mentioning that he was a staunch anti-slavery advocate and actually wrote in his journal, "To overdraw its evil That's slavery's evil. To overdraw its evil is a simple impossibility.
Awesome.
Yeah. Great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Duke looked up to Livingstone, and with good reason. Duke himself spent 15 years in Africa. According to his bio in the Livingston program, he spent 4 of those years farming and big game hunting in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. I don't have much information regarding his hunt, besides what we can kind of infer from his Shona nickname, which was Hantapania, which translates to he who hits seldom, but when he does, hits hard. Now, this could be a flattering description of his temperament or a joke alluding to his success with a rifle.
Or it could be a joke alluding to his penchant for hitting the bong. Just throwing it out there.
Could be.
He doesn't hit often, but when he does, he hits hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just like deep. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't know what the state of cannabis was in 1930s in Britain. Oh, actually in Africa. What we do know for certain is that Duke ended up with a hippopotamus trophy, but we'll come back to that in a minute. What Duke did have was a self-authored resume as a hunter, a showman's eye, and a performer's attitude, which made him perfect for the Daily Mail's job. And so, the Daily Mail, who, at the time, don't forget, was run by a fascist Nazi sympathizer, contacted Duke and sent him to Loch Ness to bring back evidence of the supposed monster.
Sounds like a really fun job.
Right?
Yeah. Even though you were being told to go to the job by a fascist, of all the things that a fascist could tell you to do, that's actually not a bad thing to do.
It's not bad, right?
It's not bad.
And you have to understand that, again, this is a man, he adores these explorers. He wants to be one of these explorers. He's gone to Africa, has this reputation that he's kind of built himself as like, I'm a hunter, I'm a worldly man, right? Mm-hmm. And to be given this job by what at the time was actually like a gigantic newspaper in London and in the entire UK was an honor for him, and was somebody acknowledging Duke as the man that he wanted to be seen to be.
Right.
Right? So I'm sure he was just thrilled over it. Like,
Yeah.
really excited to do a great job and bring back evidence of this monster.
Yeah. Okay, so he's like kind of like a Josh Gates figure.
Josh Gates of Expedition Unknown,
Yeah.
Destination Truth. It's kind of that's a reasonable comparison, I think. Actually, like that's sort of the type of person that he wanted to be. I'm gonna go to this place. I'm gonna hunt this thing. Yeah. You know, I'm sure that he was the type of person who, if he had taken big game trophies, he had them mounted on his wall. Well, we know. Well, we'll come back to his particular trophies in a sec. But I'm sure that if he had taken like an elephant or something, he would have those tusks made into wall hangings or canes or
A cool
blah,
necklace
blah, blah.
or something, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was probably the type of person who would point it out all the time, like, oh yeah, there it is.
Right. In case you missed it, here's
Yeah.
a gigantic elephant hanging off my wall.
Precisely. Like, look what a great hunter and what a great like outdoorsman adventurer I am, right?
Yeah.
So, within the first few days, honestly, actually within the first 2 days, Duke found monstrous footprints along the shores of the loch.
No way.
Yes, 2 days into his hunt. They were described by Duke in an interview as being 9 inches wide, of a 4-toed animal. Its prints were very much like those of the hippo. 2 days in, you would think that maybe he's just a great hunter, right?
Yeah.
Probably just great. It's fascinating that he decided to compare it to a hippo, because after the casts of the footprints were sent to the National History Museum in London, the zoology department quickly identified the prints as hippo prints. Huh. More specifically, they were made using a dried hippo foot specimen.
How did they know that?
Well, because they're the zoology
really
department.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know how they knew it? I don't know this, but this is my guess. It was a hippo print, but it was smaller, and sort of you would expect that from a desiccated hippo footprint.
Oh, interesting. Maybe.
Because it would shrink as it it gets smaller.
Okay.
Or as it dries out, it would shrink.
It's a good theory.
That's my guess.
Okay.
When I initially encountered this story, the explanation was that they were most likely made by an umbrella stand. In modern days, that sounds bizarre as hell, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't that uncommon to taxidermy an elephant foot, and like the foot and the ankle, and turn it into an umbrella stand.
Oh.
This was a thing that you would do at the time.
That is really creepy and morbid.
Right?
Yeah. That's really fucked up.
Again, if you were one of the British gentry and you could afford to take a hunting trip to Africa, right, and you bagged an elephant or a hippo or a rhino or whatever, you probably wanted to display your conquest. Yeah. So, it put it all over your home in as many places, so your guests would be more likely to notice it and be like, oh, yeah, there it is. And then you could brag about it.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Yeah, I guess, if you're going to do it anyway, you're using all the parts, which I guess is good.
That's true. Yeah. The foot doesn't just get left laying out in the sun, I suppose.
Yeah.
I would not want to kill an animal just to have an umbrella stand foot.
Yeah.
But, we're also talking about, this is only, 40 to 50 years after we here in America were hunting buffalo to extinction and shooting them out the back of train cars.
Oh, yeah, so, piling them up like 2 stories high and taking pictures of ourselves.
Yeah, you saw that photograph of the mounds of dead buffalo, bison carcasses and bones, right?
Yeah, it makes me want to cry and then move to the Orkney Islands where I can never encounter people ever again. And drink lots of Islam.
Yeah, except the 1,000 people that live on the island.
Right. Well, I'd have to figure out a way to.
but yeah, I mean, conservation wasn't a thing at the time, right? And this is all that. I guess it's manifest destiny. It's that notion that like the world is here for us to take.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so they felt as if they had a right to take and go to other countries and take and then display it. Yeah.
Yeah. Look what a great hunter I am.
Yeah.
Right. Even though honestly you were probably like led there very specifically by a guide to a place where they knew you could shoot one and then you shot it and I don't know.
It's just like now. I mean, that's how it is now.
That's the thing that drives me nuts about these people who go on these African expeditions. I mean, it's one thing when there are animals that need to be culled and you cull them. I understand that, right? Yeah. Like I totally understand that. But it's quite another to, pay to poach. And you can. I mean, you absolutely can go out in the bush, find someone who will lead you to an elephant and then shoot it from, I don't know, 1,000 yards away with your fucking high-powered rifle and be like, whoa, wow, look what a great hunter I am, whatever.
Yeah. It's just a thing. Where I grew up, there'd be guys, actually when we were driving down the road at night, my dad would catch them just pulled, like these pickup trucks just pulled over on the side of the road with their headlights up.
Yeah.
Trapping deer in the headlights in a field and shooting them out of their car, which is completely illegal and obviously. And so I remember I have a few memories actually of my dad catching guys doing this and turning them in, getting their license plates and trying to turn them. I think my dad did it. It could have been my mom, but
either way, good for them.
Yeah,
whoever it was.
Yeah, it was a really, I mean, talk about the most stupid ass lazy way to hunt.
Right.
Piece of shit person.
Yeah. and there again, like if you needed the deer, if you needed the meat, I get it.
Like, okay,
I totally get it.
Okay, if you're in a zombie apocalypse,
right,
and you are gonna die, and you have your truck,
and
you need to do it, okay, fine, because all the rules are thrown out at that moment.
Well, yeah, a lot of the rules go off the table for a zombie apocalypse.
Exactly. Like I don't blame you if you're gonna die and you need to eat, and so you feel like you need to cheat a little bit, cheat code, because like the zombies are coming at you.
Yeah,
I get it.
Right,
but we got these regulations for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are no zombies.
There are no zombies. No zombies right now.
Yeah. So just chill.
Right. You can take your allotted number of deer.
Yeah, like be an adult and hunt like an adult.
Yeah. You know that my grandfather used to shoot them across the road, right? He would sit on his porch and shoot them when they came out of the trees across the road. He just sat on his porch with his rifle.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask. Did he make sure no cars were coming?
Knowing him, probably not.
Okay. I feel like it was a bonus hit if he could get it through the car window.
He would have been elevated enough that as long as it wasn't like a high truck, it probably would have gone across the car.
Okay.
But he also would have been pretty lit at the time. So, I'm not sure how great his aim was.
Oh my God. I did not know this about your grandfather. That's hilarious. It's something. Okay.
It is something. So recently, Duke's grandson, Peter, revealed that the item used to make the tracks, these hippo tracks, was actually an ashtray. If you can imagine the bottom of and toe portion of the hippo's foot, with a silver ashtray affixed to the top of it, that's what was used to fake the tracks. Again, this seems like a strangely gaudy item, right? Never mind the incredibly morbid appeal of it. But it's possible that the Wetherells were just super tacky people, you know? It kind of makes me think that if Duke was around today, he'd probably have like a singing fish on his wall and make sure to show it to everybody who walked into his house.
Yeah. He'd be like, hey, check it out. Like, do this, like,
exactly. Yeah. Be like, there it is. Push the button, right? Yeah.
It's funny because it sings.
And sing along to it too, right?
Oh, you gotta pull out your banjo and sing along with that. It's funny every time.
If you want to go see the ashtray in question, it's on display at the Loch Ness Center in Drumnadrochit.
Shit. Oh, I thought
Drumnadrochit.
Okay.
There it is.
Wow.
So just go there. Just put it in your GPS.
With that, I'm going to easily be able to Google it and find it.
It's the Loch Ness Center. If you go to the Loch Ness Center, that's where it is. Okay. So in the wake of the hippo foot reveal, the fascist Nazi sympathizer-run Daily Mail turned their back on Duke. There are passing references to Duke being ridiculed by other papers, but I didn't find anything real concrete on that. However, given the Daily Mail's style of sensationalist journalism, it's not hard to believe that they also ridiculed him.
Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. So he did a hoax footprint thing. Yes. Daily Mail realized it was a hoax. Well, and then they got down on him for it.
To be clear, we don't know if Duke hoaxed that thing, the footprints. Duke found footprints, reported them to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail printed it saying, "Ooh, footprints found at Loch Ness." And then shortly after, the zoology department of the museum came forward and said, "Oh, these are actually hippo prints." And the Daily Mail had to print a retraction.
Oh, so they were pissed about that. Okay.
But we don't really know if Duke was the one who faked the prints or if it was a trick played on him. We honestly don't.
Yeah, okay, so we don't know that. It's just... Okay, wait, it's just so weird that a paper that doesn't have a whole lot of integrity wants integrity all of a sudden.
It's funny because journalism was different, right?
Yeah.
There was still this notion of... Yeah, like, you could print these op-eds about, like, how great the fascists were and how Hitler was really just a sweet guy. I mean, I don't know that they said that, but like Hitler's viewpoints were sound and the Nazis were going to keep the country from falling into the awful clutches of communism and that sort of thing. You could print all of that and not worry about it, but things still had to be, quote-unquote, truthful. You know, you couldn't just print outright lies.
Right, there's a difference between like editorialism and you know,
exactly
covering events.
Yeah.
So
this was not. Yeah, I don't want you to think that this was like the Weekly World News or something like that, where they were saying, because that's the American notion again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't like Bat Boy ate my house cat.
Yeah, I gotta stop being so American.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we don't know if Duke faked those photographs, or I'm sorry, faked those footprints. We just know that his family had this ashtray, right? So we can kind of connect the dots and say he probably did it, but definitively we don't know. No matter what, the Daily Mail would have had to print a retraction to this, which would have caused blowback on Duke's persona as the seasoned African big game hunter, right? Mm-hmm. Don't forget, this was a man who idolized Livingstone and really, really wanted to be adventurous, like a bushwhacking champion, right?
Yeah.
So with hurt pride, Duke left the area shortly after, and the loch went quiet for a few months. And then, on April 21st, 1934, the world was rocked by the most compelling photograph of the Loch Ness Monster ever seen, one that would continue to be the gold standard for the monster's appearance still to this very day.
What about tomorrow?
Tomorrow, who knows?
Okay.
Tomorrow's a new day.
Oh, tomorrow's a new day. Okay.
The surgeon's photograph, as it's now called, depicts an alleged creature rising out of the water in Loch Ness. You can see a small head and curved neck that terminates in a partially submerged body, hidden below the surface. Ripples flow out from the creature, and a reflection is cast on the lower part of the water. The contrast is strong, throwing the whole image into deep shadows. This is the seminal image of the Loch Ness Monster. This is, if you close your eyes and think of the Loch Ness Monster, this is the picture that you see. Like, this is the most famous image of all. Despite the moniker the surgeon's photograph, the image in question is actually attributed to Robert Kenneth Wilson, who was a gynecologist in London. I don't really know why it's not the gynecologist's photograph, but it's probably just because you didn't talk about women's bodies in polite society.
You probably get a lot more eyes on the photograph quickly.
I bet you would.
Yeah.
You know what's really funny is that while it's called the surgeon's photograph in like cryptozoology circles, it doesn't really have that name if you're just like looking as a casual person. So if you just Google things like surgeon's photograph fake or surgeon's photograph hoax or something like that, you end up with a bunch of like fake plastic surgery photos instead.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Dr. Wilson was on holiday at the time with an anonymous female friend when he took the photo. Supposedly it was taken on April 19th, although some sources report April 1st, which could very well be an indicator to the truth behind the photograph. April Fool's Day was popular in Britain at the time, and the newspapers would sometimes report fantastical claims on that day in jest, just like we do today. But remember that this was published on April 21st, so at the very least, the Daily Mail wasn't in on the joke.
Okay.
The photo itself is a cropped version, which we'll talk about more later. There are ripples around the monster, but there's no wake or waves that would indicate that the creature is moving. So if anything happened, it probably just surfaced straight up out of the water, almost like a hippo rising to breathe and then dropping back down. There's a reflection or shadow that could be used to determine the size of the head and neck. That is how far it rises out of the water and the elevation from the surface. But those numbers are still debated. Most Nessie true believers point to Paul LeBlanc and Michael Collins' analysis of the wave size, which infers the height is somewhere around 3 feet or 1.2 meters. So they'd be 3 feet out of the water. That sounds big, and we'll talk about the size of the creature in a minute. Now, it's a really fascinating exercise in confirmation bias to hear what people see in this photo. Obviously, the most common account is a plesiosaur, but others have explained it as an otter, a crane, a cormorant, driftwood, a tree branch, or even an extinct seal. Roy Chapman Andrews, the famous explorer who we mentioned before, he even weighed in on it and called it the dorsal fin of a killer whale. Do you want to take a look at the picture?
Yeah. I was actually just thinking I should.
Yeah, why don't you pull it up and tell me what it looks like to you if we are assuming that it's not actually a plesiosaur.
I think it really does look like a dinosaur head.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks so much like a brontosaurus's head. I mean, I guess it could be a cormorant. That would be so if I had to come up with a natural explanation, the cormorant makes sense, except the neck is wrong to be a cormorant and there's no beak, so I don't know. The thing that's weird to me is that if something is that big coming up out of the water at 3 feet, even if it's somewhat reasonably still, there should be some kind of wake. Instead of what I see is it looks like a really calm, almost triangular wake behind it, which makes me think that it's just, there's a bigger thing underneath that's just sort of floating and bobbing.
Right.
I don't see, it just looks like something small is causing the waves around it to fluctuate, not in the way that I would imagine something big would be fluctuating the waves.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. There's a second photo.
Oh, should I look at that too?
No, you don't have to.
Oh, okay,
it's
cool.
fine. It came to light around 1956. So first photo's taken in 34. This one's 56. The photo from 56 looks a bit like a waterfowl. But the only version we have of this photo is extremely poor quality, very grainy, very blurry. I have a background in film and photography. I've been working in the film industry for the past 10 years. I'm not convinced that these two photos were even taken on the same day, much less in the same place. The angle to the subject appears to be correct, and the sun and the shadows are in the same spot. But the water looks much rougher and choppier. The blurriness in the second photo could be caused by the camera being out of focus, or possibly the enlarger that's used to print the photo being out of focus. But to me, it looks like a foggy day, not actually like lens blur. And so the original surgeon's photograph, the one you just looked at, is crisp and clear, which makes me think that they were taken at two different times and therefore likely two different subjects.
Okay. This is the one between the 1954 one and the.
So the two photos were taken. They claim that they were taken at the same time. One was published in the Daily Mail in 1934, and then one was found in 1956.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying.
No
Okay.
one knew that there was a second photograph until 1956, when this second one was found.
Okay.
The surgeon's photo went on to become the single most important piece of evidence in the search for the Loch Ness Monster. It's been reprinted thousands of times in thousands of books, newspapers, television shows, news reports, blogs, websites, literally all over the world, right? It's such a vital part of the fabric of cryptozoology that it's almost impossible to explain just how vast the influence of this picture was. This photograph single-handedly launched a new brand of zoology, one that employed monster hunters who staked out rivers and lakes and dense forests and snow-capped mountains, hunting for elusive creatures that existed only in whispered rumors.
So you're saying before this, there wasn't really a big push to look for things like the Yeti and things like that.
Exactly. Now, people did. Right. There were always those people who were out exploring. And like we said, people were going to Africa looking for new animals, all of that sort of thing. But this was a place where you didn't expect to find this kind of animal. Right. And so it galvanized people because this image, it wasn't just a story. We were so used to hearing like, oh, I saw this thing here, blah, 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 but I don't have any evidence of it. Right. And now for the first time in the history of cryptozoology, there's a thing that we're like that. That is a clear piece of evidence that I can point to when people say, oh, it's crazy for you to sit there on the lake and look for this monster. You're like, yeah, but that guy did it. That guy caught the picture of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Duke Wetherell died in 1939. Dr. Wilson, who allegedly shot the photograph, died in 1969. While Duke went to his grave swearing that the photo was authentic, Wilson was somewhat cagier, saying, I have never claimed that this photograph depicts the so-called monster. In fact, I am unconvinced and intend to remain so. And then in 1975, the Sunday Telegraph, a London-based British newspaper, printed an article entitled The Making of a Monster. In it, Duke Wetherell's son, Ian, explained that the surgeon's photograph was a phony. His father had mounted an elaborate head and neck on a toy submarine and photographed it in the loch. Ian, who was 22 at the time, goes on to say, So my father said, all right, we'll give them a monster. I remember that we drove up to Scotland. I had the camera, which was a Leica, and still rather a novelty then. We found an inlet where the tiny ripples would look like full-size waves, out of the loch, and with an actual scenery in the background. I took about 5 shots with the Leica, and that was that.
Huh.
1975, right?
Yeah.
1975 this was published. Again, I mentioned my work is in film and photography, so I want to go into some more, a little bit of nerdy detail about
Oh yeah, get ready.
the
Here
camera,
we go.
the camera that Ian used.
This is where it gets really exciting, everybody.
All right, so to me, it's no surprise that he chose the Leica, as they were intensely popular at the time. In fact, the Leica Standard is the camera that popularized 35mm photography. It was probably intended to be a landscape photography camera because Ernest Leitz, the inventor, chose to transport the film horizontally rather than vertically. The traditional taller body cameras.
Oh yeah, they're vertical. They
Right.
I remember. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So that would go from top to bottom, right? But the Leica travels from left to right inside the camera. So it's better suited to shoot mountains, landscapes, that sort of thing. Now, what this did was give a larger active area on the negative, making it a 2:3 aspect ratio rather than the 1 to 1.33 that's used in still photography at that time. Because it's a wider image, it was well suited for landscapes and became this like very popular outdoorsy type camera. So you'd see a lot of people at the time going hiking, taking their Leicas. Okay. Adding to this portability of the camera, well, again, this isn't the type of camera where you have to throw the blanket over your head and fire off the flash bulb and stuff like that, right? And the standard lens that came with the camera, called an Elmar 50 3.5. This was based on a Cook triplet lens. It means that there's actually 3 glass elements inside the body of the lens.
Obviously.
Okay. Obviously, right? Do you know the name Cook at all?
I know Captain James Cook.
Captain James Cook. They're actually not the lenses that he made. But Cook lenses are very famous for their quality. Cook primes are used a lot in film. Like they're sort of the gold standard film lenses.
Even today?
Even today.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
What made the lens on the Leica awesome was that it actually retracted into the body of the camera. So when it wasn't in use, you could retract the lens all the way in, and you just have this kind of flat object, right? So the camera was like super portable, even more portable than like the DSLRs we have today. And for the first time, the average person could just stroll around and take pictures at their leisure. One of the more important statements that Ian Wetherell makes is to say, with actual scenery in the background. He points out that there was scenery in the background of their photograph.
Why is that important?
Well, I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
But now the photo you saw when you looked up the surgeon's photograph, did you see the far shore?
Okay. I
Tell
think
me.
I did.
You think you did?
I think I did.
Okay. So at the time, only the cropped version was available. This is 1975, remember. The uncropped version, that original version, had been lost. So we had the 1934 cropped version. We had the 1956 version that got found that was blurry and looks a lot more like a bird sitting on the water, right? This photograph with scenery in the background doesn't make sense, right? This is a detail that he's pointing out that nobody's seen in a photograph before, right?
Okay, so in the first photograph never had scenery in the background.
Right.
Okay.
The second one doesn't either.
Okay.
You know, the background of the photos we've seen, no shoreline, just ripples, right? The fact that Ian mentioned scenery would be factually inaccurate if he hadn't seen the original uncropped photo. It wasn't until 1984 that Stuart Campbell, a British writer, uncovered the original surgeon's photograph, admittedly one that had seen better days. The edges are all ripped up and there's a crease along one side, but it definitely shows more of the loch and the far shore at the very top of the frame. This original framing is interesting for 2 reasons. One, because the monster is obviously very far out, like away from the person who's taking the picture. And 2, because it's surrounded by a lot of water. Seeing this version contextualizes the size of the monster and gives you something to actually compare it to, which we didn't have before. It was just this thing in the middle of a bunch of water, nothing around it, and you're like, okay, if those waves that I see around it are 6 inches high, well, then that's information. But what if those waves are a foot high? What if they're 2 feet high? You don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can... Okay, now I'm looking again and it's cropped.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see a far shore on it, right?
No, I don't know if I can find the one with the far shore.
Just look for uncropped.
Oh, okay.
We can post all these in the show notes.
Yeah. So I found it. Oh, it looks... Yeah, I guess it...
So it tells you something, right?
Yeah.
Seems to.
It's not making a lot of waves.
And it looks very small, right?
It does look small. It
So,
does.
Remember, Loch Ness, 23 miles long, 1 mile wide, right?
Yeah.
So, now we don't know exactly where the photograph was taken. I think we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay. I feel like a mathematician could probably figure out how big that thing actually is.
Funny you say that.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that interests me is the focus fall off in the picture.
Oh.
Okay? Focus fall off is what we use to determine it's the phrase that we use to say what's in focus versus what's out of focus. Now, you can determine that based around how close you are to the object and what your focus distance is. You tell me if this makes absolutely no sense.
Oh, God. Okay.
No, please be my barometer
you mean like what you
on
just
this.
said?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can vaguely use the areas that are out of focus compared to the ones that are in focus to try to determine the height of the object in question. Okay? The foreground and background are out of focus with the subject sharply in focus. We know that the far shore is likely close to 1 mile away, given the width of the loch. Ian, or whoever took the picture, was likely shooting at f12.5 or f18 because it was a bright sunny day. In order to achieve the foreground and background focus fall off, the monster would be somewhere between 13 and 18 feet from the camera. Because the way that this works is that the focus... You have this like point where something's in focus, mm-hmm. but it's not in front of the object and it's not behind the object.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So given all these calculations, my personal opinion, this is all coming from me, right? My personal opinion is that the model is likely around 8 to 12 inches high.
Oh, wow.
Again, all under my assumptions. And my assumptions are that Ian was using the standard lens and not something else, that it was a reasonably sunny day, and that it was actually taken at Loch Ness and not somewhere else.
I guess we don't know that, do we?
Well, the Loch Ness Mystery Blog, which is a very dense repository of information, may have actually determined the location where the photo was taken. The uncropped image shows a white, like, little squiggly line in the background, mm-hmm. which appears to line up with an old rock face on the northern side of the loch. This would put the photo setting just southwest of Foyers, where we do indeed find a small inlet near Foyers' burial ground.
Yeah.
Remember, Ian said we took the picture at a small inlet.
Mm-hmm. Nice job, blog.
Right?
What's that blog again?
It's the Loch Ness Mystery Blog. The author doesn't list their name.
Okay.
They've been posting for, honestly, like decades at this point. They're a really cool repository.
Nice.
Admittedly, there's a lot of inlets along the shores of Loch Ness, but the geology for this really does seem to line up correctly. A second reason to assume that the surgeon's photograph was shot at Loch Ness is that after the shoot, Ian passed the film to Maurice Chambers, who is an insurance broker in London. Chambers used to fish with Dr. Wilson and gave him the processed and developed photos to sell to the Daily Mail. Whether or not Wilson was at the photo session, like to shoot the actual photo, we don't know that. Although the doctor was described as being a great prankster with a wicked sense of humor by one of his son's friends.
Okay.
So he could very well have been in on the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So all of this came to light. First Ian's confession of sorts in 1975, and then finding the photograph with the far side of the loch in 1984.
Which gives you a lot of context and a lot of other people context.
Exactly.
As far as, yeah.
Right, okay. Exactly. Mm-hmm. For one reason or another, I don't really know why, this interview with Ian Wetherell was just ignored for 20 years. It wasn't until David Martin and Alistair Boyd, the authors of Nessie the Surgeon's Photograph, rediscovered that interview in 1990 that the case got reopened. By that point, Ian had died, and the authors ended up interviewing Duke's stepson, Christian Sperling. Sperling claimed that he was in on the hoax as well, and that he was the one who built the monster with Ian.
So he was a kid. I mean, these people were probably kids.
They were kids.
At the time
they
were doing this. Okay. All right.
Exactly. I mean, they would have been, I worked out the math and I don't remember it offhand, but Duke was in his 50s at the time, and his kids were, I think, in their 20s.
Oh, okay. So they weren't that young. Okay.
And this guy was actually, Christian Sperling was his stepson.
Okay.
So at the time of the interviews, I mean, Ian had died, and Christian was, I think, in his 80s or 90s. Okay. He was an older gentleman. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So next time we are going to talk about the mechanics of the monster, or at least the monster prop. We'll discuss all of that, and then we will talk about why Duke went and photographed this and why he chose this particular depiction of the monster. Because there's a reason for all of that.
Okay, cool. And this is a thing that is probably not talked about a whole lot.
There are a couple of researchers.
Okay.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
We'll get into it. But there's a couple of researchers who have pretty much pinpointed why the monster looks the way it does, and it's fascinating in the context of all the research that came after it and was inspired by this hoaxed picture, and all the other people who took pictures of long-necked animals in Loch Ness, except the original image was faked, right?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated by these cryptid stories where the original account is not true, and then everybody spirals off talking about, oh, it was this, it was that, and then it builds this mythology based on something that never actually happened, right?
Yeah. And then before you know it, it's actually, people are truly thinking it happened and it's real.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Time really flies when you get into the mechanics of old cameras.
I know, right?
I was like edge of my seat, white knuckle, holy shit. Horizontal film?
Horizontal film?
What are they gonna make next? Candy that you can eat like it's floss? Like
I guess
cotton candy?
Oh.
Okay, it's my favorite thing in the world.
Floss candy is actually kind of a great idea.
They call it fairy floss.
They call it cotton candy fairy floss?
To call cotton candy fairy floss.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
They might still over in England, I really don't know. That's all I'm thinking about right now.
Oh.
And I had a Reese's peanut butter cup.
You did, right before we started.
I'm insatiable today. I need all the sugar. Okay, until next time.
Until next time.
Be safe out there.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters. If you like the podcast and what we do, please share it with others or leave us a rating and review. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.